All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. We are continuing on this summer series. As I mentioned on the last one, I'm very excited to talk some Bears football. There's a lot of things to be excited about. And so we're going to go through some questions kind of revolving or surrounding the roster as we are about a month away from camp. There's a lot of things to be excited about. There's also some question marks, some guys that we want to see take steps up, some guys that have things to prove. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So Erik's joining me today. We're going to talk about the players that we believe are in, I guess we could say, prove it seasons, have the most to prove this season. So let's go ahead and jump into it, Erik. First of all, thanks for joining me. I know things are crazy. You're in a moving process and moving's terrible. I just did it too. So believe me, I feel you on that one. So thank you again.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, twice in 7 months is never fun, but hey, it's what I signed up for, the military life. When you get told to go, you go. So with that being said, I'm going to kick off this list with the very, very top of my list. And it's not a player, it's a coach. And that is going to be Matt Eberflus, of the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Because for me, I still disagree with the idea that you're taking a coach who was in year 3 and then pairing them with a new quarterback, a quarterback that many have seen as the best prospect since Andrew Luck, no less.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the history of not just the Chicago Bears with coaches year 3 or later that then inherit a quarterback, but you look around the league all throughout history, you look at what happened with the Rams when you had a once unfireable coach who then in 2000, I believe 16, they trade up for Jared Goff. And then the unthinkable happened after the rookie season. That whole coaching staff gets fired. Yep. You look at every head coach the Bears have had in this situation between, you got Matt Nagy, you got John Fox, and you have one more right before those two. I can't believe we got their name. Not Tressman. It was the coach before Lovie Smith.
Oh, before Lovie.
Yep, before Lovie Smith. Yeah. And I can't believe we got his name, but all 3 of them got fired the year after their rookie season for quarterbacks.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just a harsh history. And on top of that, there were many times last year I thought Matt Eberflus was going to get fired.
Mm-hmm.
And had football been a 3-quarter game, the Bears would have been 10-6-1.
Yeah.
Because that's how good they did in the first 3 quarters. It was the 4th quarter that was just a complete nightmare. And I've said it many times, Taylor, they were 15 minutes away total between 3 games from winning the NFC North.
Mm-hmm.
The first game against the Detroit Lions, the Denver Broncos game, and then the notorious Cleveland Browns meltdown. And had they won all 3 of those games, they would have swept the Lions, they would have won the NFC North, and they probably would have had the number 2 seed or maybe the number 3 seed, depending on how tiebreakers broke out. But yes, I firmly believe, number 1, Matt Eberflus has to show he is the coach for the job. Otherwise, people think he's safe. I am not convinced he's safe. I think if something bad happens this year, if they don't show improvement, he's getting fired.
Yeah, and I think Eberflus is going to be a popular answer. We obviously kind of pull our Windy City Gridiron group, and we've all had multiple Eberfluses, and that I will not be surprised if on the YouTube chat line, if on the article page, if on Twitter, there's a lot of Eberfluses because I think that it's an important aspect of it. And I think that I was on the opposite spectrum. I was completely okay with them keeping Eberflus. I think that Eberflus was put in like a really odd position last year, had no running back coach, had no defensive coordinator. Granted, those were his hirings, but it wasn't like he was hiring people who previously we found the name. I was like, both of us. We've had too many head coaches, Erik. I think that's the problem.
Way too many.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that there was a lot put on, a lot of weird things that happened last season. And to me, Eberflus almost overcame a lot of it. Like you said, they were a few, honestly, minutes away, a few plays away from being a 10-6 football team. And I do think in part it is that because of what Eberflus does do with the defense, how the guys do rally around him. I've seen situations in Chicago, but also like a lot in Jacksonville, where when the coach doesn't work, we can go back to the Urban Meyer year. When it's bad and the players don't trust that, like the team will turn on the coaches fast. And we never saw that with the team in Eberflus. So that's one thing that I like. I know we kind of commented on that with Nagy too. Like players loved him and like that's why he needs to stick around. But there was also some turmoil between the whole Trubisky thing, and you were hearing, that they weren't really getting along and Trubisky called him out on stuff. We haven't heard anything like that with Eberflus. There were moments last year where it seemed like he was a little lost. I think it's because he was having to do everything. He was having to be a defensive coordinator. He was having to be a head coach. He was having to try and develop this quarterback that hadn't really started doing exactly like hadn't really progressed the way they thought they were, in addition to dealing with injuries throughout his career. So, but all that being said, it's an important season for Matt Eberflus. And he's one of those weird coaches that I've seen him in the category for like top 10 most likely to win MVP. And I've also seen him on the top 5 hot seat. So it's like such a weird back and forth with Eberflus right now. And I think that if the Bears go and win 10, 11 games and they win the North, Eberflus could be in talks for being the best getting coach of the year. If they don't, if they win 6, 7 games and the Bears fall short and are last in the division again, I think we are talking about a new coach again, which I don't want to, but I obviously want the best for what's the Bears. But I'm going to go player for my number one, and I'm going to say Braxton Jones. I will preface this with saying I'm a big Braxton Jones fan. I love Braxton. I think we've seen him improve year by year. His first year, the dude played every single snap, and because last year he struggled with injuries, I think some people were a little critical on that, and they keep pointing at that. But I'm like, the guy played every single snap the season before. So unfortunately, he kind of got injury plagued last year. I think there's a lot of things that factor into that. But I do think we've seen development in Braxton Jones. And when you see even the PFF numbers or rankings of the tackles in the NFL, both Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones have landed on almost every list I've seen of top 32 tackles in the league. So it's noticeable enough to people that he's been able to develop, and there's still things he has to work on. We talked about the bull rush. He's not very good against that. I think he needs to be able to be a little more even and be able to, at the same level, run block and pass protect. And we haven't seen him be able to hit the same high level on both of those at the same time, game to game. So those will be interesting things. But the real reason, Eric, that I think it's such a massive year for Braxton to prove it is because the Bears just signed a guy named Kyron Amagaji. I think that he's not meant to push Braxton this year, maybe immediately, but the Bears have in the back of their head that if Braxton doesn't take that next step up, we have our left tackle that we can kind of start pushing out there to push Braxton and possibly take his place. So for Braxton, it's to keep a spot on the Bears, but also like, where is your place in the NFL?
I mean, I'll give you Karan. So Karan Amagaji is an exceptionally talented football player, and he is definitely going to compete somewhere on the offensive line. I actually think when he's healthy, he may wind up competing at right guard, depending on what's going on with Nate Davis.
Okay.
And I don't want to repeat every single player, because actually I was thinking Braxton Jones number 2 for most approved this year, but I'm going to go ahead and say Velus Jones Jr. is at number 2 for me, even though, honestly, I think it might be too late already, at least to make himself into a dynamic receiver in this offense. Because you look at that depth chart all of a sudden, it is absolutely stacked with blue-chip talent. You have DJ Moore. You have Keenan Allen. You have Rome Odunze. I'm extremely high on Rome Odunze. That guy, he's going to be a special player. And to expect Velus to be anything more than like a 5th receiver in the depth chart, a gadget player, maybe see him get a couple carries of running back, because actually I think he'd be a decent running back.
Yeah.
It really comes down to if he can thrive with the new kickoff rules, because if people didn't remember, they are changing kickoffs completely to where it's going to be a much shorter amount of yardage before you meet the first tackler. And you basically are better suited with a powerful, running back style of kick returner, for the rules are coming over from the UFL. And it's going to be interesting to see if Velus can take advantage of those rules. But otherwise, he's just when he's had his moments to make a big play, I mean, that dropped touchdown against, I believe, the Chargers. The ball was literally right there in the breadbasket. He was all alone in the end zone. Dropped. Yeah. He had a big bomb that was set up by Justin Fields in another game. Drop. Just he has kind of I call it the yips, where it's a big moment, big play, and it just falls apart. And it makes me remember what you were talking about, Matt Eberflus, with the adversity, right? And players not turning on the coaching staff.
Yeah.
And this is, that is a strength of Matt Eberflus, to your credit. And also you mentioned too, when players turn on Matt Nagy a bit, I can't think of a more tumultuous situation than Nick Foles versus Matt Nagy.
Yeah.
You don't see that in the Chicago Bears, but at the same time, everybody knows that it's do or die time for Velus Jones Jr. because they don't have to say anything. They don't make statements say, hey, you need to get better. They just make transactions. Mm-hmm. And the way they stack this receiving depth chart, it is blatantly obvious to me that whatever idea they had in 2022 to make Velus Jones Jr. kind of like their copycat of a Deebo Samuel, a player that I believe the gentleman that runs the Senior Bowl even compared Velus Jones Jr. to.
Yeah.
I mean, if he doesn't do something good this year, it's already year 3. It's a 3-year league. I mean, he's got to do something this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that Ryan Poles drafted Velus pretty high. So I think that Ryan Poles and Eberflus may have given Velus a little more slack than what a lot of people deserve, because they did feel like this guy was going to come in and be able to be a guy like a Deebo, because that was what was talked about at the Senior Bowl a lot. And what he did at Tennessee was incredible. I mean, a lot of people talk about the return game at Tennessee, but he also played a factor in their offense. And that's when he was before their coaches switches. And then when the coach, it was opposite. He didn't. And then when the coach flipped, they added him a ton to the offense, and you saw him kind of have that breakout season. And so people thought you would be able to get that Velus, and we just haven't seen it yet. And like you said, there's just been too many big moments that have been bad. We talked about the muffed punts, but there's several dropped passes, one for a touchdown, deep balls. You can't have that happen. But to your point with when it comes to the return game, I think that's maybe their goal at this point, is let's see how much we can factor him into being able to be a return guy in this new kickoff rule. But in addition, they did start using him in the run game last year towards the end of the season. Mm-hmm. I remember being at the Cleveland Browns game, and he had a couple carries in that game, and I was like, is Velus
really good? I was chirping about that on Twitter. I'm like, just let him have a feature role in the backfield, because he looked very, very smooth.
Yeah.
When he was given like design runs from the backfield, I'm like, just more. Let's see more of that.
And one thing I will give credit to the coaching staff for is not just like bailing on him and like completely shooting his confidence, because they do keep giving him opportunities. So some teams would have taken that ball and been like, you're not touching the ball. You muffed 2 punts that are in big moments, or you dropped this touchdown, like your chance is done. But we saw a couple games where he was inactive, and that was almost kind of like a punishment for him. And then he came back, and where you still saw them give him opportunities. So I like the Velus. I had a list of like 5-6 people that so we didn't have like every answer the same. So Velus was on mine, but because of that, I'll go to my next number 2, which I'm going to say is another offensive lineman, and Tevin Jenkins. Tevin Jenkins is fantastic. And people know, if you listen to any of my podcasts or follow me on Twitter, I am a big Tevin Jenkins fan. I think he's not only the best offensive lineman on the Bears, but one of the best in the league when he's healthy and he's on the football field. He's just so good. He also has that mentality of like protect your quarterback mentality. And you see that extra feistiness from him. Many times he's the one to run up and protect Justin Fields in situations. And that's the type of guy that I want to see protecting our quarterback. He's got to stay healthy, Erik. Like, we can't have another season where he misses 5-6 plus games. It just can't happen because availability is the best ability is what everyone says, but truly on the offensive line, we've seen how many different formations they've had the last 2 seasons because of injuries, and it wasn't just Tevin, but Tevin every single year he's been in the NFL has missed a significant amount of time, including his entire rookie season. He's fantastic, though. He can play everywhere. We've seen him play right guard, right tackle. We drafted him as a left tackle, and then since then he's played everything. So I just think that for Tevin, a full healthy season playing every single game, especially in a contract year, is so important, and especially not just for him, but also the line. The line is better when Tevin's there.
I got to tell you, Tevin Jenkins is my absolute favorite offensive lineman for the Bears. And I believe when he's healthy, when he's actually like full head of steam, no issues, he is a top 5 caliber offensive guard. That's how good of a football player he is. And when you look at what he's done so far in Chicago, he's missed a lot of that time. And to me, to this day, it was still a very idiotic decision by Ryan Poles to trade up for Tevin Jenkins with the mindset of him replacing a pretty good left tackle in Charles Leno Jr. for that rookie season, because Tevin had almost never played left tackle at that point in his football career. He's been a right tackle. He's been left guard. He's been a right guard. He also even fiddled around the idea of being a center. But to ask a first-time player to play left tackle when the limelight's right on you, like, hey, look, you are the franchise left tackle for Ryan Pace.
Yeah.
And that puts so much pressure on him already.
Yeah.
To be that protector, the blindside protector for Justin Fields, the other player that Ryan Pace traded up for that same draft class, no less. And unfortunately, Justin Fields is no longer with the Chicago Bears. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler for reasons that we don't need to go over or rather repeat again. But the thing is, you're absolutely right. He had to be healthy. Hey, what's that?
He said Ryan Pace loved his trade ups.
He loved them. And it's like you fast forward to Ryan Poles, and Poles is so patient. He still gets players number 1 and 2 on his board between Caleb Williams and Roma Dunze.
Yeah.
Literally players rated number 1 and 2 in the whole draft.
Yeah.
But not to get too sidetracked, Tevin absolutely has to stay healthy. And it's very telling when he's confessed that he and his agent have reached out to the Bears about a contract extension. There's been silence on that matter because of what you pointed out. He hasn't finished a whole season. And Ryan Poles, to his credit, he's given as much of a leash to the situation as he can.
Yeah.
He's given every opportunity for Tevin to really stay healthy. And is it entirely his fault? No. But new GM, new head coach, whole new offensive staff, 2 different offensive staffs, mind you, except Chris Morgan. And there have been some suggestions that he doesn't see eye to eye with Chris Morgan or some other staff members. I'm sure a lot of that got hashed out. A lot of it's been figured out, but there are still some inklings that perhaps Ryan Poles is already looking to the future left guard after Tevin Jenkins.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think if Tevin Jenkins finishes the whole season, all 17 games healthy, plus possible postseason, and he's just absolutely kills it, I think then he gets his contract extension.
Yeah.
But then we go to player number 3 for me that I want to talk about, having to step up big. I'm tempted to say Javon Dexter Sr., but that would be unfair because to me, he earned the right to be the starting 3 technique defensive tackle halfway through last year.
Yeah.
Especially when Montez Sweat was added to the defensive line. Like the damage Javon Dexter Sr. just caused when he was given his chances. And it's not just me being a Florida Gator fan, but it's also knowing how big of a beast Javon Dexter Senior is when he's given that big plate. So the player I'm actually going to go with is going to be Jaquan Brisker.
Okay.
Another player that has missed a lot of, not a lot of time, but some time with injuries. He's had, I think, at least 1 concussion, if not 2 concussions.
Yeah, last year had a couple.
Yeah, last year was really rough for Jaquan. And I felt a part of it was because he had to compensate for Eddie Jackson, which is surprising for me to say. But when you watch last year, Eddie just hasn't been the same. Yeah. And it's notable that he's still a free agent. Mm-hmm. And that kind of says a lot of what the league thinks of Eddie right now versus the Eddie Jackson that you and I loved a few years ago.
Yeah.
He was
2018, he was insane.
2018 was an insane year. I've always wondered if he will reunite with Vic Fangio in Philly at some point. Yeah. I think that's going to be one of those signings you see in training camp, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But with Jaquan, he is finally given that opportunity to play a little bit more free, a little bit more loose. You've already seen it at OTAs. You've seen it at training, well, not training camp, but the mini camps where the Bears have started more of a rip and Liz approach on defense, which means instead of like the traditional Tampa 2 where you have Eddie always a single high safety, Jaquan drops into the box. Depending on the strength of the field, Jaquan would mirror the strength of the field, and then Eddie would vice versa switch sides, which would be a kind of an easy pickup for coverage and for the offense to read and say, so Eddie's single high, Jaquan is down low. Let's get an isolation matchup. This year, they're playing Liz and Rip, which is basically from Nick Saban, which, of course, Matt Eberflus once upon a time played for Nick Saban when they were at Toledo. And Rip and Liz basically means you're going to go right or left. And both safeties, they stay where they're at. Their coverage assignments are dictated by the different personnel on the field. So they have pattern matching concepts in play for the Bears defense. So it's not going to be a true Tampa 2 defense like we've seen the last 2 years. This helps Jaquan Brisker immensely because it lets him play more free. It lets him play – I like to call them more of a Raider safety instead of a strong safety because he's going to be given his opportunities to make plays on the ball like he did in Penn State. And then you think about his rookie season too, where
he was our leading sack getter.
He was a leading sack master that year. Like you give him opportunities to make more plays on the ball and in the field. You know, that's the role that Jaquan Brisker thrives at. So I think this year he's given that chance with Kevin Byard playing free safety. I love that signing, by the way.
Me too.
I don't care if he's 31 or 32. He's still an all-pro caliber safety, in my opinion. And, well, what about last year, Eric? Why do you look so rough last year? Matt Patricia, that's why. Matt Patricia can ruin an all-pro player. It's been proven many a times. When he took over the Detroit Lions defense, what happened to them? 32nd in the league. He goes back to New England as an assistant. Doesn't really do much to help himself. And then he becomes an offensive coordinator. He took over as offensive coordinator in New England.
And ruined Mac Jones.
And with Mac Jones, he completely botched that. So then he goes to Philly. Then he sells out the defensive staff and say, hey, I should be calling plays. Let me take over this play calling. Howie Roseman and Shane Steichen both said, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and give it a shot. And you saw how bad that Philadelphia Eagles defense, pretty stacked by the ways.
Yeah.
Absolutely just fell apart. So I'm giving a pass on Kevin Byard as an Eagle.
Yeah.
I know what kind of player he is. And then again, you see it already transitioning on the Bears defense. They're not making it easy for Caleb Williams in this suddenly stacked Bears offense. And they're playing with a lot of confidence. And a big part of that is Jaquan being that big playmaker at safety to complement Kevin Byard. But again, now is the time for Jaquan to step up, be that dominant player that we think he can be, that he showed flashes of his rookie season. Last year, I think it was an abomination for him, or maybe not an abomination, but it's going to be one of those sophomore slumps that you forget about. But the time is now for Jaquan Brisker to really be that dominant player.
Yeah, and I think, like, to a lot of those points, number one, yes, I feel like you could write a book on trying to figure out what happened to Philly last year, and Matt Patricia would be a large part of it, because watching a defense go from like 70-plus sacks to like half of that within one season, their interceptions drastically dropped. They couldn't tackle. They were like – the fundamentals were lost last year for the Philly, and it was so weird to watch, and especially down the stretch. So yes, Matt Patricia, obviously, that's a weird thing to tie into, but I'm with you. I like the Kevin Byard signing. I think it does help Brisker a lot, and I did hear Brisker speaking on them changing the way that they are they're playing their positions rather than that true strong and true free safety. I like that. And I feel like it works to kind of, especially for him to have, like you said, be able to just be like, go after the ball. Because when I did my Making Monsters on Jaquan Brisker, both Penn State and when I talked to his high school coach, they both were like, he is a ball hawk. He'll be able to find the ball. It doesn't matter if it's a running back, if it's a quarterback, if it's a wide receiver, whoever has the ball, Jaquan's going to be there. And we saw that year one. So we know he's capable of doing it. So it'll be fun. I agree. I think that's going to be the secondary in general to me, and I said this on my last one, is going to be really fun to watch this year. Our cornerbacks, I think, could be one of the best cornerback groups in the league. And then if Jaquan does take that step and Kevin returns to what he was pre-Philly, the secondary could be really, really fun to watch. I could go a couple different ways with this. So I'm going to go one way, and then I want to ask you about one other player. So mine, I'm going to say Demarcus Walker. I think that had this conversation a ton about what are we going to do on the opposite side of Montez Sweat.
Yeah.
Are they going to sign somebody? We were like, are they going to bring Jan back? I personally am not a Yannick Ngakoue fan. I think that it's just the last couple seasons, especially, or a few seasons, he's been on like 4 teams since he left Jacksonville. And ever since then, he hasn't really been able to truly find his groove the way he did. You expect him to be that true pass rush guy because he's terrible against the run. But if he's not getting to the quarterback, he's no benefit to your team, I feel like. So I'm not the biggest Jan fan. I know some people are like, well, he could be a cheaper option. But to me, this is where Demarcus Walker comes in. And I've talked about this a ton, how before Demarcus Walker came here that season before with Tennessee, he had 7 sacks. All were in the interior. And so I kept shouting for a long time, like, why are we not letting Demarcus Walker go and rush from inside more? Because that's where he got all of his pressures and all of his sacks in Tennessee. Last year, when Jan went out, I started tracking what they were doing with this defense, and it was rotating a lot, obviously, between Justin Jones and Billings in the middle, and with Javon Dexter and Zach Pickens a little bit. And then on the outside, they were having Kareem, whatever his name is, Green or whatever, and Rasheem Green. And Demarcus Walker was out there a ton. Demarcus Walker in that last half of the season playing edge honestly looked like he was getting rejuvenated a little bit. And I went back and I think he ended up 2.5, 3 sacks in the last 5-6 games, and tons of a lot more pressures. I want to say 9-10 pressures, several QB hits, several QB hurries. You were seeing him find his groove a little bit off being opposite of Montez Sweat. And so I'm genuinely curious now with you having Javon Dexter in year 2, which a lot of us believe he is going to take another step up. Andrew Billings, I think, is an underrated guy. Honestly, I love watching Andrew Billings out there. And then obviously you have Montez Sweat. Now Demarcus Walker and this line have now played with each other for last year. You're expecting that step up from Javon, some more pass rush up the middle. I think it could possibly be fun if Demarcus has kind of found that stride again, but it is a big season for him because if not, I think that by the trade deadline, they are looking to probably make some sort of trade to get a pass rusher. If let's say the Bears are competitive, but they're still not getting to the quarterback, or he can prove that he can be that guy to just get us through this, let Austin Booker kind of develop behind him. And then you have your guy of the future. But Demarcus Walker for himself, for the Bears pass rush this year, I think is really important.
A big thing about Demarcus Walker, I've talked with some of our counterparts, including Greg Gabriel, quite a bit. And by background, so I have a little bit of experience coaching defensive line. By trade, I'm a defensive coach myself. And with Demarcus Walker, he's kind of that classic example of a defensive lineman that he's a jack of all trades, master of none, which is not a big deal. What he reminds me of a little bit is Israel Adonijah.
Okay.
When Israel Adonijah, he was able to play both 3-technique defensive tackle, then kick outside as a 7-tech defensive end.
Yeah.
But my issue with Demarcus, he doesn't have that violent first step that Israel had. And it did set him up pretty badly to begin the season last year. As you mentioned, his best pass rush productivity has always been when he's kicked inside as a 3-tech defensive tackle, kind of like a Justin Tuck role, where he's able to kick inside for the NASCAR packages, where you have 3 defensive ends and a defensive tackle on the field at the same time. I am firmly convinced the Bears will still add another defensive defensive end at some point during or after training camp. I do understand they were involved early on in free agency. They did make a few phone calls to players like Jonathan Bernard, Leonard Williams, the defensive tackle, Danielle Hunter. So it wasn't like they weren't looking at an outright replacement at defensive end. Just they got kind of nervous of the money. I shouldn't say kind of, they got real nervous of the money. But with Jan Ngakoue, I also gave him a bit of a pass because once once Montez Sweat was at defensive end, you talk about the test factor, that pass rush productivity skyrocketed with Jan Ngakoue. He looked like his former self when he was just told, hey, pin your ears back, get after the quarterback. And that, especially you look at the Cleveland Browns game, which granted, they're beating up a bunch of third stringers at Cleveland, but still, which I'll never forgive Matty Eberflus for not just attacking the offensive line more.
I know.
And
dropping Justin Jones back.
Yeah, and then just that soap opera that
what is happening?
I threw a chair when I was watching that. I'm like, why? You have a third string offensive tackle matched solo against Montez Sweat. Go after him, please. You have an immobile, ancient quarterback in Joe Flacco. There's no excuse to let him throw for like 300 yards in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Soapbox aside, your question about Demarcus Walker, I think this is a big year for him too. And he did step up a bit when he played 7-tech defensive end. I'm going to bring this back to 2006 when you had Alex Brown at defensive end and then a young Mark Anderson as the designated pass rush specialist. I love Austin Booker. You saw me just cheering and chanting for him, with my famous Austin Booker no matter what statement.
Yeah.
When I was on a show with Greg and Aldo and Greg, and I was in the barbershop when they took Austin Booker, so I didn't see the pick live. I saw him like, they got my guy. But I think a similar situation can happen where Alex Brown was the rundown specialist for that 2006 Bears defensive line. And then on third down, they would basically have him pulled. You put Mark Anderson in, and he led the Bears with sacks that year at 12 sacks, for most in Bears history for a rookie. I think the Bears could do something similar this year with Demarcus Walker and Austin Booker, where Demarcus Walker, provided the Bears don't sign another defensive end, he is the starter at 7-tech defensive end.
Yep.
Then on third downs, you kick Demarcus Walker inside to 3 technique. Javon Dexter Sr. becomes kind of the shade, or something we like to call kicking to a G. So kicking to a G is my fingers are weird. 2-3 techniques on the field at the same time. So it'll be 2 7s, 2 3s.
Okay.
With Javon Dexter Sr. and Demarcus Walker as your 3 technique defensive tackles. And then you have Montez Sweat and Austin Booker. You could possibly, even if you want to get a little creative and you're willing to take the risk, you could have them in a wide 9. You can have Montez Sweat and Austin Booker at a wide 9. And then you have the G with Demarcus Walker and Javon Dexter Sr. as your 3 techniques. Or you could just kick Javon Dexter Sr. over to the 1, the shade, and have a similar effect. And that would be the Bears version of the NASCAR package we saw the Giants in 2008, 2009, 2010. And I think that could work very well for Demarcus Walker. But to your point, he does have to find that groove and pick up where he left off. I thought the pass rush productivity dipped when Yana Ngakwe was lost for the year with a broken ankle. So it will be interesting to see what the Bears do at defensive end. They have not been shy about, making calls around the league. It's just right time, right price in my mind. But if they decide to roll with DeMarcus and Austin, I would actually be somewhat okay with that.
Yeah. I was trying to look real quick because what did he had? So Jan had 4 sacks last season. So this is why I felt like the pass rush didn't drop. So, and I did because Javon Dexter was my pick for the last one that Lester and I did of the 3 players we think are going to take the biggest step. And Javon Dexter was one of mine. And in that he had, and I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, but his sacks at the end of the season and his QB hits were, like triple the amount that he had for the whole first half of the season. So we saw his numbers increase a ton. And we saw Demarcus Walker go from, I think, 1 sack the whole year. And then at the end get 2.5 or 3.5. I'm trying to remember which one. Maybe it was 2.5. So his doubled when they moved him outside. So it was just weird. But I do agree that we didn't really get to see a whole lot of Jan with Montez because he got hurt pretty soon after Montez Sweat was added to the Bears. So maybe it's me not thinking about that. And also probably a little bit of the annoyance I have from his time here in Jacksonville. But anyways,
understandable.
So it was a lot of drama. He was not a good teammate. And I'm really weird about people like that. So you said it was 3 sacks and 10 pressures the final few games for Javon Dexter, and he had 3 he got to the quarterback 3 whole times the whole season before. And I want to say it was the final 8 games, 3 sacks, 10 pressures. And the 9 games before that, he only got to the quarterback 3 times is what I remember reading. But yeah, so that's going to be it's going to be really interesting in general, like you said, to just see if they sign somebody, see if Demarcus Walker ends up taking a step, seeing how quick they are mixing in and how much they're mixing in Austin Booker, the step that Javon Dexter takes. Are they mixing in Zach Pickens a little more this year? We didn't see him a ton last year. Do they want to see what they have out of Pickens? So all of that I think are going to be intriguing. But one final question for you, Erik, before we go, because I know we are probably going to get this as some answers. So I want to get your thoughts real quick on this. Caleb Williams, would you put him in the category of the most improved this year?
Wow. I was about to say no, but when I thought about it, there is a lot riding on Caleb because you look at, of course, the abysmal history of quarterbacks for the Chicago Bears, and very few, if any, ever got set up for long-term success. I mean, we can write several books about Justin Fields and how not to introduce a quarterback to a situation in the NFL or anywhere really.
Yeah.
But when you look at Caleb, he has inherited the best situation of any first overall pick at quarterback that I can think of. I mean, this is well beyond what Andrew Luck inherited.
Mm-hmm.
This is better than what Joe Burrow inherited. This is really one for the history books in terms of not one, not two, 3 blue chip players, a wide receiver, a solid offensive line across the board, a defense that finished top 5 in several categories, including number 1 in takeaways.
Yeah.
Especially after Montez Sweat was introduced to the defense. I'm really on the fence with that because on one hand, if he doesn't break the super easy, cheesy records that rookie quarterbacks have had with the Bears, I'll be just flabbergasted.
Yeah.
Like, it would be a very bad sign of things to come if he doesn't like double up on all those records.
Yeah.
To
double it, it'd be 22 touchdowns.
Exactly. It's very doable. And it's like he's set up to where he could very well be the first 4,000-yard quarterback. Plus, he has 17 whole games to do it instead of 16. Yeah. So he could very well wind up breaking every passing record this year alone if things go well.
Yeah.
But even if he doesn't break the total yardage record, which okay, I mean, I expect some rushing yardage too, like maybe 200 yards rushing, because he can move. He's pretty quick. After just talking myself into it, I do think he is a player with a lot to prove. I cannot say he has the most to prove.
Yeah.
But as the first overall pick of the 2024 NFL draft class, and a player that you decided to move on from Justin Fields to replace with a player that was beloved by the whole organization. Well, I can't say the whole organization because they made a decision to remove him, but the players absolutely loved him. There were plenty of coaches that still loved him. Eberflus was really tight with Justin. And you do have to show, even your rookie season, that this whole decision to build around Caleb and not Justin is worth it.
Yeah. And that's where I think my head is. He wouldn't be in my top 3, 4, 5 because I think that I've also lowered my expectations. Like, I'm so tired of getting let down by quarterbacks here that I'm just like, I'm not going to put myself up there right now. So I'll probably have a little bit lower of what I'm expecting from Caleb than maybe some people. I've been flat out that I'm more excited about the Rome Odunze pick than I am the Caleb Williams pick because I love him so much. But I think that because of like what you said, you gave up, and I'm using the word gave up, you gave up on your former quarterback to go draft this guy who is almost given to you. And I'm not arguing this is in the past, but they were in a very unique circumstance and they had to take that. And I completely get it. But you gave up on your former quarterback who, like you said, was seeing glimpses. Some people were saying he was improving. Some people were saying that's a conversation for another time. But a guy who had a lot of high hopes and you were seeing things from and was an athlete beyond what we've ever seen here in Chicago from a quarterback. And you spend a first round pick on him, and you spend a lot of money and draft picks on surrounding him with things to help him. And so I do think there is a level of, he has some things to prove. Like, prove to us we didn't make a mistake by booting our old quarterback out of the building and drafting another one. Like, I think that, to me, I'm not at 1,000 yards and 30 touchdowns this season, but I am going to be expecting I would say 35 at least, and 23, 24 touchdowns. And like you said, probably some more rushing touchdowns and a few rushing yards too. And I'm expecting 10 wins, because with this roster, you should be able to win at least 10. So
there is no excuse.
Yeah.
There is no excuse.
Yeah. Unless injury. Like, that's the only thing. If someone gets hurt, like if DJ or Keenan or Caleb or someone gets hurt, that's the one time. But even that, like, I feel like we have enough depth now that we should be able to make up for these other circumstances if you happen to lose, obviously, other than Caleb, because then it's Bajent season at that point.
God,
but I know.
Not again.
But yeah, so I just want to get your take on that, because I know we'll probably get some Calebs in here. But anyways, Erik, thanks for hopping on with me. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Absolutely. Hey, look forward to the next time. Thanks for having me on, and bear down as always.
Bear down. Are we doing this?
The claw, I guess. Because, like, Lester is probably laughing his ass off right now because he remembers how harsh I was about Caleb before all this happened.
Oh, I know.
And for me to be doing the claw, like, I have accepted everything, and I'm cheering for the kid, and I want to see him do well. So, Lester, this one's for you, man. I'm doing it. You can take a screenshot of this for you.
I love it. All right. Thanks, Erik. I'll chat with you next time.
All right. See you later, Taylor.
Bye.